Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. We'll now go to the committee of the whole. We have 5 items. The first item is a hearing examiner semi-annual report to the council, and we're glad to have Sharon Rice with us today. Welcome, and it's all yours.
Thank you very much. It's very good to be on this side of the bench. This is my first time. Actually, I entered from the back door back there. It's first time back there. It's good to see things from all perspectives. So thank you for having me. Thank you very much for the appointment. I never anticipated this would become an appointment because I understood that the employee position was, valued and cherished. And I know Dawn thought that I should apply for the employee position, and I'm glad that it worked out the way that it did because this allows me to provide services here, and I've found that I've enjoyed it so far. So I provided this report. It's got rather exhaustive information about my background. I don't think you want to hear more about that today. If I'm wrong, feel free to ask questions.
Oh, don't worry about that.
Okay. Okay.
I think there was a typo in your bio.
That's not a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it.
Just point over that way and everything will be okay.
All right. All right. I'm also not going to go into too much detail on the individual cases because, again, they've all been spelled out sort of in detail. I thought I would just move right along to the section on recommended sections of the city code that could use some review. And again, so I started in July. I've held a sort of a limited number of cases. I haven't had that much opportunity, not that big of a breadth of case types, so I don't have that many suggestions for you, but give me time. From the first hearing, it became clear that Bellingham had a different idea of variances than I had. And when I arrived here and found that, it was interesting, I want to say, a good experience for me because I come from this very rigid place of the zoning code is in place to protect the public good, and it needs you have to meet a very high standard to obtain a variance from the adopted code because it's been adopted for public welfare. So the culture or practice historically of considering whether or not neighbors are opposed to variances and finding that if they aren't, there's less harm. There's no great, also the project doesn't have obvious detriment. This background, this approach was new to me, and I think I scared staff quite badly with my stiff arm response to this approach, and it has been interesting to me. So there were a couple of variances I did approve where I had, in other jurisdictions, would have probably not. And that was because of the fact that the properties were unique. The properties themselves were unique. So, for example, the very first variance I heard was related to the property that was at the end of a dead-end road. Sorry, but let's see. It was the O'Brien variance. So this property was at the end of Lincoln Street, which dead ends. It's a strange triangular-shaped property. Several things about the property were so unique that even though the building could have been configured to meet all setbacks, the neighboring properties hadn't met setbacks, and in the case of this really unique property, the variance made sense. In other variances, I found that the circumstances weren't related to the property sufficiently. So given that state law and your city code say that circumstances have to relate specifically to the property, I did deny a couple of variances. Now, there is a long history of applying variances the way that my predecessor did. And if it's the City Council's intention that there be more flexibility and more discretion in the variance criteria, I would be happy to honor that with more direct legislative direction to say that in the City Code. So I just want to bring that to your attention. State law, case law is pretty specific that the circumstances have to relate to the property. And so I've always been stickler. In fact, I had a county commissioner request a variance from me once in a county where I worked, and I denied his application for variance.
That's good.
And I said, okay, you're probably upset. And he said, no, that's why we hired you. So. So just to bring that to your attention, I don't know what else to say. If you have specific questions about the cases I brought forward, if you want to ask those now or...
I want to start out by saying that I actually do appreciate the way you're applying variances, using the appellate court's decision and what it's St. Clair versus Skagit. I do think a strict interpretation is usually best. I also saw how you applied some the right amount of, I think, flexibility to that. So I would say keep it up. It looks good to me. Thank you for that. Oh, and by the way, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Sharon, thank you.
Thank you.
She also noted a few other issues in this report that I thought were interesting. Not that one. I wouldn't revisit it, but there were a couple other ones, like on defining dwelling unit, which, one dwelling unit had 25 people in an unusual circumstance. Maybe the code should stay that way, but I'd kind of like to talk about it. And there was also something having to do with how our code isn't clear on whether or not the hearing examiner can dismiss certain appeals without a hearing if there's no response from the appealing party. It's practiced by the hearing examiner, but it's not in our code. These are kind of smallish, but I think important issues, and I would just like to take Mrs. Rice's memo and just refer to the Planning Committee to discuss with staff some of those issues. So that's a motion to refer this memo to the Planning Committee to discuss over with city staff at some future date.
I'll second that.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 601. Councilman Borneman excused. Okay. Next, anybody else have anything? Boy, you're really doing well. You're very quick.
I'm quick.
You must have been briefed. Okay, well, thank you very much, and
All
welcome
right.
to Bellingham.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is a bid award for Boulevard Park sewer improvements. Go ahead, Ted.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. This is really a Public Works Parks project. It is to make a series of sewer replacements and repairs, including pump stations at the Boulevard Park. So today, before you is a bid award. We have a failing sewer system down there. This project would rehabilitate that, including putting in a new pump station that would be managed by the Public Works Department. It would be tied into our remote SCADA system, meaning that the plant operator would be able to identify whether there was any problems with the system, pump failures, anything of that note. We would put it on our normal pump station, lift station maintenance program so that folks would go out and make replacements on a routine basis. Eric is here to answer any questions about the project, but we are here to recommend award to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, which is RAM Constructions. I do want to highlight a mathematical error. It does not change the apparent low bidder, but there was a math error. If you look under the fiscal impact on your agenda bill, it identifies the apparent low bid as being $588,027.10. The actual correct number is $587,918.41.
Okay.
So I just want that to be clear. It doesn't change anything, but we should read that into the record. So with that, any questions about the project? Eric is here. Marvin is also here from the Parks Department.
Well, you cannot have a failing sewer system next to a coffee shop, so this is a slam dunk here. So, Michael.
Yes, thank you. Does this would this pump station serve both the bathrooms at the coffee house as well as the ones that are to the north of there? Those bathrooms, is the whole thing on one system?
Currently, there are two pumps that they go down a common line. So the Woods Coffee pumps to the lower restrooms, and then the restrooms pump it up over the railroad trestle. This project will replace both those pumps with a single pump at the restroom area at the north end of the park. So it's taking two pump stations, replacing them with one. We get a gravity line that'll go from Woods Coffee building down to the new pump station.
I did have someone say that in that area they could every now and then get a whiff of sewage, unfortunately.
This is a very expensive project, but this is one where we look at it from the risk and the consequence perspective, and the risk of having a potential failure is pretty high. It has happened before. The consequence of that is also very high, and the public perception of that is one of those consequences. Public health and public safety and the environmental are pretty important to us, so the expense is worth the risks and the consequences associated with that.
This friend of mine apparently has kind of sensitive sense of smell, has sensed similar whiffs at the near the overpass of Samish over I-5, I guess on the east side. Do we know about any failing pump stations over there? Do we need to send a dog over there to find out?
Not off the top of my head, I'll ask operations about that. I will say that when you have either force mains or lift stations, it's not uncommon during certain conditions to have some odor problems. I mean, we
Back up.
certainly try to deal with them and eliminate them or certainly reduce them, but I'll ask operations about that.
Jack?
When other departments have facilities such as the library or the museum, or in this case, parks, what's the interfund relationship when it comes to capital facilities or replacement, in this case, the replacement of them? I mean, because this looks like it's coming directly out of our sewer funds, but, you know, is it coming, should it be coming out of the Parks Department budget as it would be, say, like if the library had some sort of, you know, like carpet replacement or something? Is that coming out of the library budget, or do we have a separate fund for facilities upgrading for them?
Yeah, it's a good question. To use the example, like a facilities repair at the library, we do have a separate fund for that. We have the Facilities Fund 530. Everybody that's a part of that, meaning the departments that use the central facilities that's in Public Works, they pay into that fund. It's on a square footage cost, so you pay for your maintenance, your custodial, and your utilities. It goes into Fund 530, and we fund all of the repairs out of that. This particular case is a little bit different. We don't have a separate funding source. It would normally be funded out of the Parks Department. We used to fund restroom maintenance in the parks out of the sewer fund. It's an issue where you have to make sure that you're in line with fund accounting and appropriate use of enterprise funds. In this case, we feel that, and I think it says it in the summary statement, we certainly believe this is an appropriate use of sewer funds, meaning that this is a portion of the public sewer system. It's a pump station, it's a sewer main. It happens to be within a park rather than a right-of-way. But the reality was a fix like this wasn't something that could be funded out of the Parks Department budget. It's something that, as Eric mentioned, given the public health considerations, the extremely high use of Boulevard Park, the fact that we have a private tenant there, the Woods Coffee, certainly something that we felt needed to be addressed. And so this is being funded entirely out of the sewer fund. So we will look at our annual main replacements and other capital expenditures and adjust it accordingly. And we're putting money into this because we believe when you look at all of the risks that Eric identified, this rises to the top, and this is a project that should be addressed. And sewer funds is the way to get it done. And so we're comfortable with that. We think it's the right thing to do, but it does strain the sewer fund a little bit.
One follow-up on that. I would imagine that in our lease with Woods Coffee, which from my recollection was a heavily subsidized lease just to get a tenant in there, that we didn't include any costs or any revenue to the city associated with utilities such as sewer or water. I don't know. I guess maybe, Marvin, if you could clarify whether or not we did have any utility arrangements within the lease with Woods Coffee for things like this.
Members of council, I'm Marvin Harris, City Parks Department. You're correct in your assessment of the lease. Essentially, Woods does pay for their electrical service. The water is back charged them a percentage of the water. It's not much for that operation. The restrooms that are located adjacent to Woods have always been public restrooms, so that part of it was all part of the agreement with Woods when we came through. So as we go further into time, that lease will be renegotiated at some point.
Yeah, well, I hope that we would, at least appreciate the fact that we're spending nearly $600,000 on this sewer pump when we do renegotiate the lease with them.
Marvin, how long is the lease for? I can't remember. Maybe you can't either.
You're challenging my memory right now. It was, I believe, a series of renewable potentials there, and I think off the top of my head, it's about like 10, 15 years, I believe.
Yeah, something like that. Okay. Okay, council, what's your wishes?
I'll move to award the bid.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries 601. Councilmember Borneman excused. I'll report that tonight. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks, Marvin. Nice seeing you. Won't see you very much. Okay, our next item is a presentation to council regarding the Marine Nearshore Connectivity Final Report and update on the Bellingham Bay Juvenile Salmon Assessment.
Thank you. I almost walked away. I thought I was done
Yeah,
for
you
the
thought
day,
you
but
were
not. Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. Renee's going to give a presentation on the Marine Nearshore. This is a follow-up to some conversation that council had during the waterfront master plan approval process, looking at further assessment of habitat connectivity along the nearshore. At the same time, we were also looking at another study that was looking at juvenile salmon along the nearshore. We've got results, preliminary in some cases, but we do have results from those studies, and so Renee's going to go over a brief presentation and answer any questions that council may have. So, thank you.
Thank you. Renee LaCroix, Public Works. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on a couple different things we have going on. As Ted said, we have the Marine Nearshore Habitat Connectivity Study, which was completed in December, and I'll update you on that. And then I'll follow up with some preliminary data from the juvenile fish use of the Marine Nearshore study that we have going on. We're going to start with the Marine Nearshore Habitat Connectivity Study. So about a year ago, as part of the Council's adoption of the waterfront sub-area plan, there was a request for staff to do a connectivity study, and the request was specific to the waterfront sub-area. And what staff ended up doing is we thought, well, since we're going to have this effort, let's do the whole city, let's do the whole jurisdiction plus the UGA, and really have a comprehensive, holistic look at our marine shoreline. So the study area encompasses from the edge of the Nooksack Estuary up in the upper right corner down to the south end of Chuckanut Bay, down in the lower right corner. And when Council directed staff to conduct this work, we issued an RFP and we contracted with Environmental Science Associates as the firm that did the work, and they did a great job. They broke the shoreline down into 20 different evaluation units, and they built on the foundation of the existing breakdown of the Shoreline Master Program, so trying to be consistent with our existing codes and regulations. Where it was necessary to break those SMP designations up into smaller units for precision, they went ahead and did that, and we came out with a total of 20. In each of those 20 units, we looked at 13 different evaluation elements. And they used a rating matrix, and I'm not going to get into a lot of the details today. It's all in the report, which is available online. This is just meant to be a high-level overview. But so there was a rating matrix, and the assessment was qualitative. It was not quantitative. They did not go out and collect actual on-the-ground data. This was largely a GIS analysis and looking at the different features that were in each unit. And the results are relative within the city of Bellingham. So it wouldn't be appropriate to take the results of this and compare it to, say, the outer Washington coast. These results are relative to each other within the city, within the jurisdiction of within the area of study. So for the purposes of this study, we broke the definition of marine nearshore down into the ease in which organisms move about or processes can function unimpeded within the landscape of the nearshore environment. So we looked at just how things move around and how easy it is for things to move around. And this is an example of how the units were looked at. So for each unit, and this particular unit is just an example, but this is the edge of the Nooksack over here. This is Marine Drive out here. Locust Avenue's down here. So in this particular unit, I put it up here just as an example of how they looked at each particular unit. So for each particular unit, they looked at connectivity parallel to the shoreline, which is in the blue, and they looked at connectivity perpendicular to the shoreline, so how easily things could move from the shoreline up into the terrestrial vegetated zone. And in this particular one, there's a lack of infrastructure, so it had high connectivity. There was no armoring in this whole section, so it had high connectivity for that. And the riparian zone was also intact and contiguous along that area. And the railroad corridor in this instance was away from the nearshore. So in this example, in evaluation unit number 1, it got a score of 11.6. So the higher the score, the higher the connectivity. And those two axes that I told you about, they combined those together and came up with one score for those two units. So again, the higher the score, the higher the connectivity. And for comparison, this is probably one of the most impacted or lowest connectivity areas of our shoreline. This is the Fairhaven Shipyard. And these results are very common sense and intuitive, but it's an area where we have a lot of infrastructure, we have a lot of shoreline hardening, we have piers that stick out. And so for looking at this section of shoreline in a perpendicular to the shoreline axis, it's very hard for organisms to make it along the shoreline, whether it's sediment transport or a fish. So it received a low score. And then going from the water to the terrestrial environment, we find the terrestrial environment lacks marine riparian vegetation, and so it received a low score for that as well. So the lower the score, the lower the connectivity. And these are the evaluation elements that were looked at for each of those 20 units. And they were selected to be representative of a real mix of organisms and processes. And so for the marine connectivity, which is again parallel to the shoreline, these are the things that were looked at. And the terrestrial to marine connectivity, which is again perpendicular to the shoreline, these are the things that were looked at. And for each one of these elements, there was a series of questions that was asked. And again, that's all in the report, and you can go through it. There's a matrix in the appendix that shows how things actually ranked. This just gives you a sense of what was looked at. So just going to fly through the results real quick, but this is the next clockwise unit from what I showed you previously. We looked at the Nooksack in that last example. This is Little Squalicum Park right here and the concrete pier that comes out, and this is Squalicum Harbor over here. So this is an area where you see, again, high connectivity along the marine nearshore and along the terrestrial. And so you'll see with the color scheme is that the darker the blue and the darker the green, the higher the connectivity score, the more connectivity there is. And as we progress over into more urbanized areas, the connectivity scores decrease and the colors fade. And this is the waterfront area, and it's very intuitive what you would see here. We wouldn't expect to see a lot of connectivity in this area because it is an urban environment. It's very built up. There's a lot of armoring. There isn't a lot of riparian vegetation. So it's an area where it is difficult to get processes like sediment transport to reestablish here, or for juvenile fish to migrate through this area because it doesn't provide the right habitat elements or connectivity that they need. And so again, going down the shoreline, you see areas that are darker with higher connectivity and then lighter with lower connectivity. And then we keep going down the south, and unit number 18, it ranked the highest within the study area, which isn't surprising. So overall, the analysis indicates a strong relationship between development and connectivity, not surprising. The units containing developed features scored lower than units containing natural beaches, estuaries, and free of tidal restrictions. And the thing that did surprise me about this is that they came up to the conclusion that the dominant feature impacting connectivity along both the marine and the terrestrial axes was the railroad. And I guess it shouldn't have surprised me because it's there, but I sort of, because it's always there, I sort of ignore it. But if you look at the entire Puget Sound area, that's where the railroad is. And so if you're looking to improve connectivity, that's the single most impacting feature in our marine nearshore. So now I'm going to move on to the preliminary, and I cannot stress that word enough. These are highly preliminary results from our nearshore fish assessment. So this is a project that we have funding through the Bellingham Bay Action Team. We get funding from them on a regular basis, and we were able to use $125,000 towards this study. We also used money from our surface and stormwater utility, and we received money from the WIRA-1 Joint Board. And we had contributions from NOAA and the Salish Sea Marine Survival Project to make this happen. This was a huge effort regionally because they were looking at multiple estuaries systems within the region, and we were able to plug into that existing framework and get Bellingham Bay and the Nooksack Estuary assessed and analyzed as well. So for 2014, this is the areas that we sampled, and we broke it down into sorry, if I did not say that, I don't think I did say this. We contracted with Skagit River Systems Cooperative for this work, and they're a highly regarded research group that's out of Skagit. They're the ones that were doing the work in the other estuaries within Puget Sound. And so for this work, it was a real strong partnership between them and the City of Bellingham and Lummi, because we were able to tap into 10 years worth of data that Lummi has collected in all these different sample locations. So the $125,000 and the money the city contributed didn't pay for that 10 years. We just paid for the 2014 effort. So we paid for all these samples to be taken in 2014. We went out to each site every 2 weeks from February through October, and we're continuing that again for 2015. So that just started last week again. And then in the analysis, not only are they taking the data that was collected in 2014, but we're also able to compile that with the 10 years of historic data that we have from Lummi, which goes from 2003 to 2014. And these color coding is related to habitat area. So the marine nearshore in the Bellingham jurisdiction has yellow, and then the estuary has blue, and then higher up in the estuary is red, and then lower down in the Bellingham Bay is also yellow. So this is the full data set that goes from 2013 to 2014. And the red is the Bellingham Bay nearshore sites, so the ones that were yellow on the previous slide. And the blue is the Nooksack tidal ones, so the blue and the red from the previous slide. And this is looking at density. So what we see is these fluctuations over time, where not only in the raw numbers, but also in the relationship between the two areas of the bay. So for the most part, from 2003 to 2012, there were more or higher density of fish found in the Nooksack estuary. What we see in 2013 and 2014 is that there were higher densities of fish in the Bellingham Bay marine nearshore sites, which was real interesting. And part of what Eric and Skagit River Systems Cooperative is going to be analyzing over the next while is why that was. And one of the hypotheses at this point is because it was temperature related. In February 2014, if you remember, it was freezing cold. And so they think that it was actually warmer in the bay and the fish out-migrated into the bay. So we'll see how that holds up now that we have a very warm February, if that continues for 2015. So for the 12-year data set, again, from 2003 to 2014, there was 2,130 beach seine sets and over 5,000 Chinook caught. There was a lot of annual variability, as I talked about, from one year to the next, and there's different reasons for that. And part of what the Skagit River Systems Cooperative and Eric Beamer are going to help figure out is why that is. Was it due to habitat or the number of outmigrants, or was it floods or temperature or connectivity or all of the above? It remains to be seen. And 2014 has the best spatial and temporal coverage of all those years that were sampled. And we did, just in 2014, we did 856 beach seine sets, and we caught over 1,000 Chinook, over 60,000 different fish caught, and 58 different species caught. So now zooming into the Bellingham Bay, this slide, we're looking at the difference between marked and unmarked juvenile Chinook. So unmarked, think wild; marked, think hatchery, because they mark the fish that are coming out of the hatchery either by adipose fin clips or by coated wire tags in the nose. And what you can see in the difference is that in the early months, February, March, and April, the fish, we have higher density of fish in the Bellingham Bay marine nearshore. And then later in the year, we see higher densities in the Nooksack tidal delta. So it is seasonal, and that the wild fish are generally arriving earlier than the hatchery fish. And in 2014, the Bellingham Bay sites had more fish than the Nooksack estuary. And then just looking at the Bellingham City of Bellingham jurisdiction, the marine nearshore, we looked at what type of habitats they're utilizing, whether they're utilizing open marine nearshore, if they're looking at, or if they're utilizing the freshwater lagoons and the estuaries. And what we found was that in the lagoons, which is the blue in this slide, we saw higher densities of fish earlier in the year, and the other shorelines we saw lower densities, and that happened later in the year. And the thought is that those lagoons and the protected estuaries, they're protected from higher wave energy, and they have freshwater inputs. So we're realizing that those habitats are important. And a lot of what is going to be looked at in the next year, and then when we get the 2015 data, is bioenergetics. So one of the hypotheses is that the bioenergetics is driving where we find the fish. So one way to talk about that is that if you have fish in the estuary and there's not enough habitat there, it will drive the rest of the fish out into the marine nearshore. That's one way to talk about it. What this actually shows is that on this side, we're looking at the size of the fish in grams. On this side, we're looking at time. So at any point in time on this graph, we see that the habitats that had freshwater influence, so the marine nearshore lagoons, Post Point, Whatcom Creek, Paddon Estuary, Squalicum Creek, those sites, the fish were always larger than their counterparts that were found at the same time in the Nooksack estuarine emergent marsh or the forested riverine tidal. And so what this tells you is that there's more grow opportunities for fish in the habitats within the city's jurisdiction, and that's based on 2014 data. So if you were a fish and you were looking to get big fast, you'd head to the freshwater inputs in the lagoons and the pocket estuaries. So again, preliminary take-homes, Nooksack Delta and Bellingham Bay shoreline habitats are consistently used. Both habitats, both areas are. And within the system, we're seeing both wild fish and hatchery fish. So the Whidbey Basin here is not talking about fish that are migrating out of the Whidbey Basin. They're talking about the genetic. So fish that are hatchery fish based out of, that originally came from Whidbey Basin. And in Bellingham Bay, we realized the protected nearshore and lagoon habitats with freshwater are important very early in the year. And the fish are in those environments long enough to be influenced by the good habitat that is provided and by the bad habitat that might be there. And then we're also, and we'll hear more about this later on, but there's a strong signal in the data that shows that the Bellingham creeks are contributing to the fish that we see along the marine nearshore and Whatcom Creek in particular. And so that's part of what we'll be looking at. And one of the things that we have going on right now, in fact, we're installing it today, is a smolt trap in Squalicum Creek. So we'll have a good understanding of what's coming out of Squalicum Creek, and then we can use that data to inform this study. And we also are learning more about the landscape connectivity, and you'll hear more about that as the data gets wrapped up. Any questions?
Thank you, Renee. Any questions for Renee? Michael? Go ahead.
Renee, thank you. Very informative report. I'm wondering if there's a graph up there over the months of when the rainy weather is, and in particular when the stormwater is likely to be carrying the most amount of pollutants into the bay, when does that occur? What I'm hoping you will say is it doesn't occur early in the year when all the fish are there, but my guess is that's exactly when it might be occurring. So do we know when the runoff is greatest in terms of its pollutant load, not the volume of water, but the volume of contaminants in there? How does that annual cycle look?
So I can answer it from a fish perspective, and maybe Ted can weigh in from a more stormwater perspective. We do see the fish out migrating during the rain events, so the spring freshets. And Bellingham is no different from any other municipality in the Puget Sound area. We're trying to treat as much stormwater as we can, and so hopefully that pollution loading is reduced over time. But that's why stormwater is important, is because there is that inherent link between the outmigrants and when the stormwater comes out, and it's based on rain.
I don't have, off the top of my head, the numbers on water quality from a stormwater perspective throughout the year over time. We certainly have some water quality data associated with our outfalls, and I can provide council with the information that we do have, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Renee, will the connectivity report be available for public input before it gets finalized? I mean, this is a draft, right? Or is it a
The
final
connectivity
report?
study is final.
It's a final report,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Have you received any, has it been released to, like, resources or any other groups that?
Yep, it's available on our website, so anybody has access to it. And if there's feedback, I'm happy to hear it.
Okay. And will it be used then to, the connectivity report part of it, will that be used to help, I guess, develop some sort of list of improvements, you know, nearshore improvements or practices, I guess, management practices that we would want to explore in the future? Mm-hmm. I mean, is that really what we're going to use that report for, or is it going to be put on the shelf?
So if you read the report at the end where there's conclusions, it does make the statement that Bellingham Bay, the waterfront area in particular is so developed that it is hard to get, it would take so much money to get any real habitat value back out of that. And so it makes, it uses the analogy of stepping stones, that if, as that area develops and the whole marine shoreline develops, if we can make sure that there is structure, not necessarily function, but structure to get the fish through the system as they move around the bay, that is a viable approach. But it does recognize that it's severely impacted, and it's going to be very expensive to get it back.
I mean, when we had the waterfront hearings and discussion about that, one of the items was, you know, do we go and have a legitimate set-aside back from the log pond area, for instance, within our shoreline master program, and we ended up going pretty much just the opposite way, where we started encroaching on what we previously had as buffers, which would then impact on the connectivity issues. And I think everybody understood that it was a very distressed environment as it exists now, but with future development in the next decades, that there would be opportunities to go and create good environment, that we would have future connectivity, even though we don't have it today. I guess, you know, how do we get to that point if we want to get to that point?
So I'll use Boulevard Park as a good example.
Okay.
So that's an area where there is a master plan in place. It was adopted by council, and there is habitat structure throughout that shoreline. So that corridor right along the water was, the master planning was done in recognition of the need for habitat and connectivity. And so where it was appropriate and where it made sense with the cleanup and the final use of a public park, we tried to put habitat elements in there. So there's a nearshore bench, and there's a couple different pocket estuaries or pocket beaches. And I think that approach, if that were used everywhere everywhere it was appropriate within the waterfront area, I think that would provide the links, the stepping stone. Because right now when you look at it, it's sort of a no man's land from a fish migratory standpoint. It's very hard from a fish to get from Squalicum, the mouth of Squalicum Creek, clockwise around the bay. And so if you redevelop that in a way where you're still meeting the goals of the community in terms of economic development and all that, you can get structure in various key places to provide stepping stones to provide those migratory corridors.
If we had city ownership of the lands. And that
Amongst
that got
other
into
challenges,
the waterfront
if you had enough
challenges,
money, if you
is
had
that we didn't
ownership.
have ownership of the land. We had regulatory control, but we ended up somewhat abdicating that. But yeah. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dan?
Renee, will the daylighting of Patton Creek have any eventual impact on the score for the evaluation unit that is associated with the estuary?
It won't. So the swath of land that was used in this evaluation was 200 feet waterward of the ordinary high water mark and 200 feet landward of the ordinary high water mark. So it's that immediate riparian area along the near shore. And so the Patton Creek daylighting will be really beneficial on a lot of levels. It won't change this score.
Roxanne?
Well, I just wanted to show appreciation as a member of the Nooksack Indian Tribe for the relationship that you've developed with the Lummi Nation and their immense resources that they have. I don't really think enough people understand that the Nooksack Tribe and the Lummi Nation have so much data on water quality, habitat, habitat management, and also the leading reasons why we have all the data about how many fish and shellfish there is, because we manage that. And we also are happy to share information that tells the stories of some of your statistics. Like, I think it was 2013 when a debris flow came down to the Nooksack River and took out major sections of the river. So that can help put the pieces together on why the data is the way that it is. But I'm just grateful for that partnership. And if I can create any ties, just let me know.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Renee. Thank you. You're now excused, Ted.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the next item. That's approval of the February 9th committee meeting minutes.
Move approval.
Yeah, the green, Did anybody second that motion? Roxanne moved.
Second.
Michael seconded. Any discussion?
Jack, lights? Lights. Lights.
Oh, lights. Okay, all those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. 601, Councilman Boardman excused. Old or new business? Jack?
Uh-oh, Ted left. All right, maybe. Well, actually, Brian, you're the next one I have. Let me do yours first. We can wait for Ted tonight if we need to. I noticed, not last night, but a week ago last night, that the PEG Access Bellingham programming was changed, was altered, and that we weren't even listing Access Bellingham, and I'm wondering whether or not there was a change within the way that we were addressing that.
Brett Heinrich, Mayor's Office. That's a good question, Jack. I actually don't know with respect to that particular piece of programming. It could be that we didn't receive any materials to air. I know it was at least a practice for some time that we would repeat program, and that was a change we made back in, I want to say, December. So I'll certainly check with Dale over in BT.
But you know, last night, surfing around as I always do, that screen was blank, not only through Access Bellingham, but the Planning Commission meeting and the rest of the programming, so there must have been something wrong at the station or something.
We'll certainly follow up and see
I
if,
watch it quite often. So.
if it's all right. We'll come back tonight.
What
I think we
happened
can get
a
some
week
answers.
ago was that there was a green screen blank.
Oh, really?
That Dale had explained that there was a transcription problem between the feed-in program that they had received.
Oh, I see.
It wasn't Access Bellingham. It was another program, but there was just a green screen for for like a half hour.
Well, I think that Brian said he'll check on that for tonight's meeting. And secondly, there's been no policy changes of any kind. So it had to be a technical glitch.
Michael?
I want to follow up on some new business from the March 9th meeting where Pinky and I were appointed to a social media council work group. We met with members of the administration. The city council has actually several Facebook pages run by departments or out of the mayor's office, and there's no administrative policy on how those are used. And so a draft policy has been written by the administration, and the question was whether or not that draft policy, which applies to or would apply to the Facebook pages run by the departments, works with regard to the city council, and it was decided that no, that policy would need to be modified to fit elected officials who speak differently than, say, an employee would speak. And so that policy will be modified and brought forward to us to adopt and incorporate it as a council policy governing ourselves. We talked about, in addition, a Facebook presence for the city council office in the same way there's a Facebook presence, say, for departments or the mayor's office. The idea is that someone in our office, at this moment probably Marie, would help administer that Facebook site, put up council-related business. It'd be an opportunity for council members also to post that site, and also an opportunity for council members to have a city council Facebook site under their persona. That one would be co-administered by the city, so the city could archive that site and index it the way they're archiving and indexing the other Facebook sites, and that would make it available for public records requests and for searching by the public.
Jack?
Is there a way to be able to go and create the same type of information that you want either through this Facebook situation or this Nextdoor situation where you're using private contractors for the social media, to be able to have the public that does not want to go and do Facebook or doesn't want to do Nextdoor, that they can still get the information that they need through the city's website?
Well, there are two things. One of the, I don't know. It wasn't talked about, but one thing that was talked about is part of the draft policy is whenever possible, anything posted in one of the city's existing Facebook sites, it will link to the same resource or information that's available on our web. So the idea is not that this will be an independent source of information, at least with regard to the city's current websites, but it'll be an alternate way of accessing the same information. In both cases, a member of the public would need access to the internet. So this is not the way to reach everyone. This is sort of like going to meet people where they are. They are on the web. We publish to our website. We people are on Facebook or other social media. The policy is written very broadly for any kind of social media to meet the public where they are in the future, and the idea is to cross-link them. But truthfully, we didn't discuss about anything, what you were talking about.
Well, I mean, we've had this, you've read your emails over the last week and a half, 2 weeks or so, but the situation where the police department is using this program called Nextdoor, and that you actually have to be a member of Nextdoor in order to be able to access it, which kind of precludes some people in the community that don't want to go and provide yet another account to a private corporation in order to be able to get city information. The concern is that if the police are using that but not really tying it into the website itself, our city public website, how do we get the information? How does somebody that doesn't want to use Nextdoor or doesn't want to use Facebook be able to access the information that the police want to go and use with that one site, but not necessarily using through the city site?
Right. We didn't talk about Nextdoor. I think the administration actually been looking into it. I'm sure Kelly may want to comment on that. I have a similar problem with Nextdoor. I've been invited by many neighborhoods.
What the hell is Nextdoor? I've never heard of it before. I'm sorry.
Nextdoor is sort of like a microscopic, well, not microscopic, a small online community that is defined geographically, and so that a neighborhood can set up a Nextdoor site. It's a private company. You say, this is our geographic region. Anybody with an address in that region can join in the discussion. And the idea is to make it geographically specific. And, of course, you have to go online to Nextdoor, so it's not for everybody. I've been asked by numerous neighborhoods in my area to join their Nextdoor site, and I can't do it because if I don't live in Edgemoor, I can't join the community. So I guess Jack's concern is that Facebook may be more broadly open, Nextdoor not so much so. But to be clear, we didn't talk about it in the work group, and I'll let...
Go ahead, Pinky.
I just wanted to add that this is a discussion about having more opportunity for engagement and other ways for us to communicate. So it's not about exclusion. This is about opening it up because a lot, especially a younger generation, tend to communicate more this way. And we want to just share more what's going on at city and on council, and another opportunity for engagement. All those other ways that other people still communicate are still out there. All the information on our website and our press releases, etc. This is just an additional opportunity for people to engage. And this is not mandatory for a city council person to have a profile, or this is an opt-in and an opportunity for us to share what's going on city council and the things that we're doing in the city.
The concern I had was that you have to opt in order to access the information.
No.
And if the police department are exclusively using Nextdoor and not using the website, then, in Michael's case, he can't even access it. Or in my case, I don't want to have anything to do with any of them, but I would like to be able to go and at least access the public city website, that I don't have to put in a password. I can just go and access it. The police, it seems to me that the police are not using the city website to go and present that same type of information that they would then voluntarily go and use for Nextdoor or Facebook or anything else.
Cliff or David, you want to make a comment? Go ahead.
Can I make a comment
Yes.
on the point of the whole thing?
Go ahead. Then I'll let Cliff.
Well, the Vanessa Blackburn was the person that did the assessment of the communications in the city and the social, and the one that's leading this policy that we're writing to work with you guys. And I think that the point that Pinky made is the right point. We're meaning to expand. And I'll let the chief or David talk about the community policing, but that was an opportunity for the community police officers to directly communicate with their neighborhood, and it was encouraged and suggested by MNAC and the neighborhood groups. So this wasn't something necessarily that the city came up with, but the police officers certainly were happy that there was a way the neighbors were talking to each other about certain things. And I don't think it limits us. But I would suggest that Vanessa come and make a full presentation to you about what the background was and what she did, and so you can ask her questions as someone who was there from the very beginning, and it might help clarify things. So, Chief, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Nextdoor is one channel in which the neighborhood police officers communicate, but we also utilize the web page. We also use the department's Facebook page. We have a Twitter account. We're pretty active on Twitter. I think the NPO's use of that Nextdoor was an attempt to reach out to specific neighborhoods who are actively using it as a means to make contact. It was not meant to be a sole source. And we have to kind of reach out to where the community is. We don't necessarily set the parameters of where they're going to communicate from. I'm comfortable with it. I think there were some issues around how do we document what occurs within those conversations in regards to what the officers say, and we have a solution for that. It's a pretty simple solution where the information can be documented internally by the city. What I would not want to do is discourage the use of Nextdoor in a way where the neighborhood itself, because that's the key to this program, it's a neighborhood police officer program, is that the neighborhood itself feels like they're disconnected from those officers, or forcing them to go to a broader venue where they feel like they're not standing out as a neighborhood per se and not talking specifically about their neighborhood issues and problems that they want the officers to be aware of.
Okay. Roxanne?
One of the things that I see happening, and this is why I generally support Nextdoor, is that, for example, I see on Facebook private neighborhood communities talking about public safety issues, and that's not getting the attention of the public safety professionals that can help. So I'm constantly on those sites saying, did you report this to the police? Did you do good outreach to your neighbors about this? And that's where Nextdoor comes in handy, and that's where I see that being a benefit, so that the officers can work with the people that are paying attention through that site. And it's a concerted effort, not just someone just saying something out to the stratosphere and nothing's getting done.
Okay. Michael?
Just to finish up, so what will happen is that I suppose a draft of the administrative policy will be made available to us, but then also a different version of that modified for elected officials that we'll need to approve on ourselves on how we can and the rules that we will bind ourselves by for using Facebook or any kind of social media. It'll be broadly written, and that'll come forward sometime in the future.
Okay.
Gene?
Oh, we thought about having that actually be featured during our council retreat in April.
April 16th, yes. Okay.
So that's our recommendation. We'll bring it up on the
That'll be
agenda.
added to the pile.
Okay.
Mayor.
Can I suggest that the policy that you adopt is not for elected officials, but for council members?
That's probably a good idea.
Because I'm actually an elected official, too.
Really?
Okay.
We didn't know.
Vanessa was going to
Thank
look
you.
into that.
Elected officials. Official elected.
I was trying to be inclusive, but I think
Okay.
you're right. Well, we want to tailor it so it fits appropriately to the right people.
Okay. Okay, Pinky?
Just two quick little updates. I just wanted to let everyone know that the RFP we put out for our signature event that the city is funding, we got 18 submissions, so that's really exciting. We have a lot of paperwork to look through, and we'll be doing that in the next couple of weeks, but we got 18 submissions, so that's pretty exciting. And then also wanted to let you know that I did go and attend the Associated Washington Cities conference last week in Olympia, and there are some really exciting things happening right now, and there's very positive outlook on the fact that we may get more revenue dollars from liquor tax, and also an opportunity for sharing funding through recreational cannabis. So this would bring additional funding to our city, and this is very exciting. Obviously, legislature is having a big challenge this year on budgeting, so if we get those dollars, that will be a very pleasant surprise. So thank you for the city for sending me.
Anything else on Roland, Roxanne?
I just wanted to ask, and if nobody responds, I'll just ask again in a future meeting. Could we set a date sometime in the future to discuss paid and protected sick leave? And I'll ask that of the mayor, I'll ask that of my council members.
Sure. I don't see why not. Mayor, you have a comment? That's, okay. Sure, okay, we'll set it up.
Okay.
Jack?
Thank you.
So, Roxanne, once you, well, I guess we're agreeing to that, but to be done like in the committee of the whole?
I'm sorry, yeah, a committee of the whole session, just
Okay.
basically a work session.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I think Dan was
Oh,
before I
Dan, go
was.
ahead.
Just wanted to report out that I was able to attend the League of Women Voters Summit on Economic Security for Women in Whatcom County, along with council members Michael Lilliquist and Pinky Vargas. The topic reports were eye-opening as relates to adult education, child care, food, health care access, housing, and poverty. That report can be found on the League of Women Voters website. That is lwvbellinghamwhatcom.org.
And it looks like this. Okay, any other old new business? I have just one. Oh, let me do this real quick now.
Okay.
Then Kelly has one. I just want to thank everybody for their flexibility or exhaustion on scheduling the retreat, whichever you feel. It's going to be the 16th of April from 6 to 9 in the fireside room. 13th. Oh, I'm sorry. See, I've already screwed up. April 13th. Okay.
You said the fireplace room?
Yeah, over in Munich. Go ahead, Jack.
Okay. This is an item that I talked with Ted about earlier today.
Ted, why don't you just go and sit in Terry's spot? I mean, you've been here all day long. Why don't you just come up here?
So we had a discussion about traffic calming issues, and there basically is two different issues. One has to do with the administrative policy associated with collector arterials and whether or not we could have traffic calming on collector arterials, as providing some sort of exception. And the second is whether or not we want to actually kickstart or restart the Neighborhood Transportation Safety Program?
Very close, neighborhood traffic safety program.
Traffic safety, okay. Which is something that we did for many years, and it was a special pot of money that funded traffic calming techniques throughout the town. And if you see speed humps or traffic circles, it came from that program. And whether or not we'd want to start that up again through some sort of thing. So Ted and I talked about it. I wanted to bring it up to the council to see whether or not we could have a head nod to have Ted and his crew come to, like, I guess the Public Works Committee or something with an initial discussion about how we might be able to do both of those issues.
Okay.
Like within the next couple months.
Yes, we'll work with Marie to schedule that.
Great. Thank you, Ted.
Hey, thanks, Ted. You might as well just sit there until we're done. Mayor Linville.
Mayor Linville. That's my mother. Oh,
Mayor,
no.
not mother. I didn't say mother.
I'm fine. I just had something I think it's for new business. It could be for old business. As you know, the county executive and the sheriff are putting together a plan to put together a ballot measure for the new jail. And I would like the council to be informed about what is being proposed. And also, we've been asked if we would support the proposal. This is something that's been going around to all the small cities. It is a proposal that I think deserves council discussion, because I know there's a variety of opinions about what we're looking to do. We do not have jurisdiction over this, so no one is asking our permission necessarily, but obviously how our council feels about it makes a difference probably in the success or failure of the proposal. We're going to propose 2 work sessions on the 9th and the 23rd. The first one I won't be here, so you'll just have to swim through that all on your own. But it's just going to be a presentation of the facts. And then on the 23rd, I think we could also potentially get the sheriff and the county executive to come and answer questions about it. So I just wanted to let you know that has been going on for over a year. There's a deadline that the county council thinks that they should achieve, which is the end of April, because if they want to get it on the November ballot, it has to happen by a certain time. So
it's this year then. They want to do it this year.
they want to do it this year. So I just thought it was a good time now that it looks like there's a fairly clear recommendation that they want to make. that you could have a chance to ask questions about it and see if you would like to support it with a resolution or not, or we're going to have an agreement. Obviously, there will be some agreement between all the cities and the county in how the funding gets distributed. But
Okay.
okay,
Any objections to that? It's okay, so that'll be on March 9th and the 23rd. Okay, thank you, Mayor. Any other old or new business? Okay, we have one executive session item expected to last 30 minutes. It's litigation, city versus, what's the correct pronunciation?
Yi.
Yi. Okay, like ye old, okay, I got it. Litigation, City of Bellingham versus Yi. It's supposed to last 30 minutes, so I'll reconvene at about 3:15. Meeting adjourned.